Welcome to Module 1, Literacy Landscape in New Brunswick. In this presentation, we will define literacy and provide you with some literacy statistics, provide you with a mini snapshot of the adult literacy landscape in New Brunswick with respect to who is doing what and why, and we will review Laubach Literacy New Brunswick's role, its mission, vision, and values, and its strategic plan. Defining literacy. Literacy is the ability to read, write, speak, and listen, as well as to use numeracy and technology at a level that enables people to express and understand ideas and opinions, to make decisions and solve problems, to achieve their goals, and to participate fully in their community and in wider society. One of the main organizations examining Canada's skills compared to other countries is the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. This is done through the OECD, also known as the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, of which Canada is a member. There's 3 types of literacy which are measured by the Program for the International Assessment of Adult Competencies. Prose and document literacy is the first kind. Respondents are measured for their ability to engage with written texts, print-based and digital, and thereby participate in society, achieve goals, and develop their knowledge and potential. This requires accessing, identifying, and processing information from a variety of texts that relate to a range of settings. The second is numeracy. Respondents are measured for their ability to engage with mathematical information in order to manage the mathematical demands of a range of situations in everyday life. This requires understanding mathematical content and ideas and the relationship and representation of that content. And the final has to do with digital technology, communication tools, and the networks to acquire and evaluate information, communicate with others, and perform practical tasks. This requires an understanding of the technology, so like hardware, software applications, commands, and functions, and solving problems with it. The measurement for this is divided into 2 different but related parameters. First, the familiarity with computers and how to use them, and second, the ability to solve problems commonly encountered in a technology-rich world. So what are the proficiency levels for literacy? And for this, we're looking at prose literacy. So level 1, the person will have few basic skills and a great deal of difficulty with text. At level 2, the person will have limited skills. They will not be able to read well and will only be able to deal with materials that are simply and clearly laid out. At level 3, the person has a basic skill level, but they may still have problems with more complex tasks. Level 3 is considered the minimum skill level needed for successful participation in society. At levels 4 and 5, people will have high levels of literacy with a wide range of reading skills and many strategies for dealing with complex materials. Individuals at this level can meet most reading demands and can handle new reading challenges. So what does this mean for us? Well, you'll be interested to know that 4% of Canadians scored below a level 1. As well, 4% of New Brunswickers. 13% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 1. 15% in New Brunswick. At level 2, you will find 32% of Canadians at this level and 35% of New Brunswickers. So we're a little bit more at level 2 here in New Brunswick. 38% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 3. In New Brunswick, that percentage is 36%. 13% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at a level 4. And 1% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 5. Together, that's 14% of Canadians at level 4 and 5. In New Brunswick, that percentage is only 10%. So you'll see if you look at levels 2, 1, and below 1, we're at 44% of New Brunswickers performing below a level 3. So let's look at numeracy proficiency levels. At a level 1, tasks at this level require the respondent to carry out basic mathematical processes in common, concrete contexts, where the mathematical content is explicit with little text. The task usually requires simple one-step or simple processes involving counting, sorting, performing basic arithmetic operations, and understanding simple percents, such as 50%. At level 2, tasks will require the respondent to identify and act on mathematical information and ideas embedded in a range of common contexts where the mathematical content is fairly explicit still or visual. Tasks tend to require the application of 2 or more steps or processes. At level 3, tasks will require the respondent to understand mathematical information that may be less explicit. Tasks require several steps and may involve the choice of problem-solving strategies and relevant processes. At level 4 and 5, tasks at this level will require the respondents to understand a broad range of mathematical information that may be complex, abstract, or embedded in unfamiliar contexts. These tasks involve undertaking multiple steps and choosing relevant problem-solving strategies. So how are we doing Canada and New Brunswick for numeracy? Well, 6% of Canadians scored below level 1. A little bit worse here in New Brunswick at 7%. 17% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 1. 21% here in New Brunswick. 32% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 2. 35% here in New Brunswick. 33% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 3. 29% of New Brunswickers. And finally, 12% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 4 and 5, compared to 8% of New Brunswickers performing at level 4 and 5. What about when we look at digital literacy? Well, below level 1 means that tasks are based on well-defined problems involving the use of only one function with a generic interface to meet one explicit criterion without any categorical, inferential reasoning or transforming of information. There's few steps required and no sub-goal has to be generated. At level 1, tasks typically require the use of widely available and familiar technology applications such as email software or a web browser. There's little or no navigation required to access the information or commands required to solve the problem. At level 2, tasks typically require the use of both generic and specific technology applications. For instance, respondents may have to make use of a novel online form. Some navigation across pages and applications may be required to solve the problem. At level 3, tasks typically require the use of both generic and more specific technology applications. Some navigation across pages and applications will be required to solve the problem. The use of tools, for instance, the sort function in Excel, is needed to make progress towards the solution. So what do you need to know about this? Well, 15% of Canadians and 15% of New Brunswickers scored below level 1. 30% of Canadians and 31% of New Brunswickers can perform tasks at the level 1 level. 29% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 2. This drops to only about 26% in New Brunswick. 7% of Canadians can successfully perform tasks at level 3, and 5% of New Brunswickers. It's interesting to note that 19% of Canadians were non-respondent to this part of the test, either because they did not have previous computer skills or they opted out from this part of the assessment. In New Brunswick, 23% of respondents opted out. So Canada ranks at the OECD average in literacy, below the OECD average in numeracy, and above the OECD average for digital. Canada has a higher proportion of its population at the highest proficiency levels in literacy and digital compared to the OECD average. And Canada has a larger proportion of adults at the lowest proficiency level in all three domains compared to the OECD average. Literacy and numeracy scores are highest at ages 25 to 34. Individuals aged 16 to 34 are the most proficient in digital. Despite higher levels of proficiency in digital among youth, 9% display proficiency only at the lowest level. Women and men display similar proficiencies in literacy and digital, but men have higher numeracy skills than women. Higher education is associated with greater literacy, numeracy, and digital skills. The employed population displays greater information processing skills than those who are unemployed or not in the labor force. Workers in managerial and professional occupations display greater information processing skills than workers in other types of occupations. Literacy and numeracy skills of unemployed and not in the labor force populations are very similar. However, not being in the labor force is associated with lower digital skills compared to those who are unemployed. As is the case with most participating countries, literacy and numeracy scores in Canada are highest among those 25 to 34 years of age. The average score for literacy is 285, and for numeracy, it's 277. The average scores for ages 16 to 24, when many young people are still in school, is 276 for literacy and 268 for numeracy, while the figures for those aged 55 to 65 are lower, 260 for literacy and 251 for numeracy. We've included this chart for literacy to show you what that looks like. Digital skills are higher among younger age groups. Despite a higher level of proficiency, 9% of youth score at the lowest level. Youth and adults ages 16 to 24 and 25 to 34 are the most proficient in digital skills, with similar proportions of each group scoring at a level 2 or 3. 52% of the 16 to 24 age group and 50% of the 25 to 34 age group. In contrast, those aged 45 to 54, 29%, and 55 to 65, 17%, have lower proficiency in digital. Despite a higher level of proficiency among youth, 9% score below the level 1. Non-completion of the digital assessment is also related to age. 1/5 of the 45 to 54 age group and 1/3 of the 55 to 65 age group were not assessed, compared to only 77% of the 16 to 24 age group and 8% of the 25 to 34 age group. So the question might come up, what role does gender play on literacy? Overall, no gender differences were observed at the national level in literacy and digital skills. This remained true at all age levels except for the 55 to 65 age group. Among 55 to 65-year-olds, men score 6 points higher than women in literacy, and a larger proportion of men in this age group scored at a level 2 or 3 in digital, 19% compared to 14% for women. The picture for numeracy, however, is quite different. Across the full age spectrum, men have measurably higher average numeracy scores than women. And this difference becomes more pronounced in the older age groups. For example, in the 16 to 24 age group, the average numeracy scores are 273 for men and 264 for women, a 9-point difference. In the 55 to 65 age group, however, the difference is more than twice as large, with an average score of 261 for men and 242 for women. So what about literacy organizations in New Brunswick? Who's out there helping to improve literacy? Well, there's actually a number of organizations throughout the province, too many to mention. Some, like those above, may specialize more in adult literacy, but there are that also support children and youth, as well as those who assist with GED and GED prep. So some organizations you may be familiar with or come across that are supporting literacy include the Community Adult Learning Network, or CALS, or CalNet, the Government of New Brunswick, the Department of Post-Secondary Education, Training and Labor, and Working NB. Of course, there's Laubach Literacy New Brunswick and all of our affiliated councils. There's the St. John Learning Exchange, Frontier College, the Literacy Coalition of New Brunswick, multicultural associations across the province. There's also Kodak NB, which promotes French literacy skills. And of course, there's many others. So what is Laubach literacy? Well, one of the first things that we're always asked is, where did the name Laubach come from? Well, Dr. Frank Laubach's techniques for tutoring adults became a program incorporated as Laubach Literacy International in 1955, which encouraged and supervised the development of literacy programs worldwide. In that same year, World Literacy of Canada was incorporated, and Dr. Frank Laubach was proclaimed its first honorary president. The Laubach training approach is based on Dr. Laubach's work as a missionary who became involved in teaching English while in the Philippines during the 1930s. The Each One Teach One program has been used to teach approximately 60 million people to read in their own language in more than 300 countries. Laubach literacy has been in Canada since the first tutor training workshop was held in Lunenburg County, Nova Scotia in 1970. A few years later, several literacy councils in the Atlantic provinces were formed. The first council in New Brunswick was established in St. John in 1975. After more than a decade of pioneering work, the first Laubach Literacy New Brunswick was formed in 1981 and incorporated in 1983. In 2021, Laubach Literacy New Brunswick celebrated its 40th anniversary. You may want to know, how is Laubach Literacy New Brunswick organized? Well, we have a provincial board of volunteers. The board governs the actions and interests of Laubach Literacy New Brunswick as a provincial organization, determining our strategic direction and priorities and monitoring its operational finances and activities in relation to the defined strategy. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick is staffed by a full-time executive director who has experience working with nonprofits and directing communications, project and event management, and community engagement. We also have a part-time coordinator of provincial volunteers that supports our affiliated councils and volunteers. They work to help with recruitment as well as with resources, primarily. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick tutoring services are delivered through community-based affiliated literacy councils. Each council has its own volunteer board to govern the actions and interests of literacy programming in that area. Funded in part by grants from Laubach Literacy New Brunswick, they also raise funds to further support individual community-based programs. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick provides the tutoring resources and tutor training for all councils throughout New Brunswick, as well as providing continuing education for all volunteers. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick also assists the councils as needed with community engagement, fund development, and marketing. At Laubach Literacy New Brunswick, our mission is to provide programs that improve the literacy skills of New Brunswickers. Our vision is to empower New Brunswickers to change their lives and build stronger communities by improving literacy, one adult, one goal at a time. At this point in our organization's evolution, 40 years on, and to ensure the future leads to even greater success, Laubach Literacy New Brunswick undertook a comprehensive strategic planning process in 2020 and 2021. That included engaging with all of our stakeholders, both internal and external. A strategic plan is important because it tells us how to get from where we are today to the future we want to create. It keeps us focused on the areas that will have the greatest impact in achieving our mission and helping us reach ever greater numbers of learners each year. Aligning our work to advance these strategic impacts and being able to measure our success on a provincial level will allow us to better address the literacy challenges and opportunities in our province and secure our role as a partner to government as they work to create a strong and literate province. Our plan is grounded in 3 strategic impacts that clearly define the future we are trying to attain. Strategic impact number 1, all New Brunswickers will know about the literacy programs and services we provide. We will work in collaboration with our community partners to improve access and knowledge of our services. The focus areas here include awareness and education, information exchange, and community engagement. Strategic impact number 2, our adult learners will have a robust selection of programs and services to choose from on their literacy journey. Here, our learners' achievements are our achievements, and we are committed to offering the English literacy programs and services that they need for success. Focus areas here include investment in innovation, capacity building, especially at the council level, and better access to programs. Strategic impact number 3. Our councils throughout the province will have the resources they need to meet the expectations of their constituents, both volunteers and learners. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick relies on its councils to provide community programs and services, empowering them with education, resources, and support. More New Brunswickers will have access to the literacy support that they need. Our focus here includes service coordination, training, and governance. Currently, there are 7 Laubach Literacy New Brunswick affiliated councils in New Brunswick, with more than 200 volunteers and tutors. We depend on our volunteer tutors to provide free confidential tutoring to adults in communities throughout the province. Laubach Literacy tutors are men and women of all ages from very different backgrounds. These volunteers are committed to helping others improve their reading, writing, and basic math skills. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick asks volunteers to commit to working one-to-one with a student for 1 year and up to 4 hours a week. But remember, this can vary widely depending on the availability and schedule of the learner as well. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick provides tutors with an orientation to literacy issues, basic tutor training, access to a variety of teaching and learning materials, and access to continuing education opportunities. What do we expect from our volunteer tutors? Well, we do expect that they'll work with a learner for up to 4 hours a week for 1 year. Very often we see that this is much fewer hours in a week, but between getting ready for a lesson and having that lesson, it can take up to 4 hours. We expect that you will enter data into the tutor portal, which is our database, on a regular basis, telling us how your learner is doing, what resources you're using, what goals you and your learner have created together. We expect that you'll participate in continuing education opportunities and maintain total confidentiality regarding your student. What makes a good tutor? Well, the tutor is responsive to the needs of the individual learner. They're going to facilitate the learner's learning, respect the student and the prior knowledge that they bring with them to the learning experience. They're empathetic, caring, and interested in the learner. They're creative in adapting to suit the individual learner's needs. They're going to be enthusiastic and willing to keep learning themselves. They're going to provide constructive feedback to their learner. They're going to welcome the learner's input into how they want to structure their lesson and what they want to work toward. And they're going to be well organized for each lesson. Since its establishment in New Brunswick in 1975, Laubach Literacy has provided thousands of hours of training and tutoring by hundreds of volunteers. Laubach Literacy New Brunswick currently services a number of different target groups, including adults with low-level literacy skills, young adults preparing for employment or higher education, and new immigrants needing to improve their English reading and writing skills. We seek to help at least 200 learners each year using a combination of one-to-one, small group, and online learning programs and services. To review, in this presentation, we have defined literacy and provided you with some literacy statistics. We've provided you with a mini snapshot of the adult literacy landscape in New Brunswick, and we reviewed our role. If you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to your tutor coordinator at your council or to us here at Laubach Literacy New Brunswick.